actually promoting good wash at workplace. And finally, we are also a partner of UNCO Water Mandate to mobilize resources for wash and advancement. Now coming to the point, why water and what are the water-related challenges? If you just follow the dots, the big dots, you will find that water is mostly impacted in the supply or production value chain, production part, in the factory level. Secondly, due to poor wash, the workers, they actually overburdened with disease. As a result, their productivity reduces. So what we do, WaterAid, work for water security and efficiency, water provisions and practices, and create evidences, research-based evidence for advocacy. Any product, any production is related to raw materials, the people who are associated with production, and finally advocacy initiative. So we are working all three. We undertook a research with the partners named here on boosting business, where we are trying to link the productivity with wash to make a business case. And we see that if you really invest on wash, you will get 15% of reduction in absenteeism and increase of punctuality. And also, ROI tends to become around $7 if the investment continues in wash for 10 years. And this can be even improved since our study took place in COVID, and normal time it could be even higher. Based on the study, we globally designed a project, Wash Apparel Collective, where we are inviting all the brands to join together for pool funding for improving wash, and also advocating for creating business enabling environment. It's a great opportunity for all the brands to join us for peer learning and advocate together for improved policies and practices. So I invite you, all of you, to join us. Please feel free to reach out to us and get the final report from us. And we are open to partner with you for the greater interest of the planet. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hazeen Jahan. Ladies and gentlemen, Bangladesh is a developing country that has made significant progress in the apparel and textile industry. But this sector still heavily relies on traditional energy sources, which can harm the environment and contribute to climate change. The adoption of renewable energy through green funding is a pathway to a net zero future for the apparel and textile industry in Bangladesh. Green funding can help businesses to transition to more sustainable energy sources, reduce the cost of energy, improve energy security, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. By embracing green funding, Bangladesh can take a step towards a more sustainable future. Now we are moving into our third plenary session of this forum, Renewable Energy through Green Funding, Pathway to Net Zero for Apparel and Textile Industry in Bangladesh. To take their seats on the dais, I would like to request Mr. Javed Imran, Chief Risk Officer of IDCOL, Mr. Nasser Izaz Bijoy, CEO of Standard Chartered Bank and President of FICCI, Mr. Ahmed Shaheen, Eastern Bank Limited, Additional Managing Director and Head of Corporate Banking, Dr. Vidura Ralapanawe, Executive Vice President of EPIC Group, Mr. Ashish Damle, Country Director of Oxfam in Bangladesh, and Mr. Naushad Mustafa, Deputy General Manager of Bangladesh Bank. Requesting all of you to kindly take your seats on stage. I would also like to request Mr. Morten Lehman, CEO and founder of Tailwind, to please come up and moderate the session. Total duration of the plenary session will be 45 minutes, and a bell will be rung exactly at the 20th and the 40th minute for the attention of the moderator and the panelists. During this session, we will be conducting audience polls on issues relating to panel topic. Please scan the QR code on the back side of the identity card given to you at registration desk and participate at the poll questions of the session when the moderator asks. Now, I would like to leave the floor to the moderator.
Thank you very much. And another great panel here. And this time discussing the road to a net zero future through green funding and renewable energy. And what pleases me especially about the great panelists today is that we have the different stakeholders here. We have the infrastructure development, we have the banks, and we have the NGO that will keep us all accountable for what we do. So first, I would like to ask Mr. Jabbar Imran, who's the Chief Risk Officer of the Infrastructure Development Company, to set the scene for us. Where are we today in Bangladesh in terms of renewable energy, and where do you see the future?
Thank you. So I first thank you for giving me the opportunity. First, I would like to tell you that Bangladesh is not the contributor. It's only contribute in greenhouse gas only less than 1%, 0.56% to be exact, but is the highest impacted country in the world, maybe one of the highest, 7th impacted country. So, so to reduce greenhouse gas emission, Bangladesh has given set a target. So Bangladesh government has targeted around 40% of its energy from renewable energy within 2041. And in ITCOL, we are working in that line. We have taken several projects. From 2003, we are working on solar home system. So it is one of the largest off-grid solar home system in the world, and there are more than 4 million houses where installed solar home system. And now what we are doing rooftop solar, because Bangladesh is land scarce country. We are financing solar rooftops, and for 1 megawatt of electricity, if you have roof more than 70 to 80,000 square feet, you can get 1 megawatt of electricity. So we are financing long-term finance in rooftop solar and in concessional terms. So we have rooftop solar, and in a study, it shows that Bangladesh has a capacity to generate more than 3,000 megawatt of electricity from rooftop, but we have targeted 300 megawatt of electricity within 2025. So in that case, we have already installed 40 megawatt of electricity through rooftop solar. In another cases, we have done solar irrigation, and we have installed 1,500 pumps, solar irrigation pumps, all over the country, and we have 26 solar mini grids. So that's how ITCOL is doing and contributing in renewable energy area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now over to the people with the money, the banks. And starting with you, Mr. Nausha Mustafa, the Deputy General Manager of Bangladesh Bank. Can you talk about the work you're doing to secure funding, and also what makes you hopeful for the future?
Thank you, Morten. Actually, Bangladesh Bank is, as a policymaker of financial sector, we have been focusing on sustainable financing starting from 2015 or 16. And 2018, we have first issued a comprehensive guideline to the banks and FIs that you need to focus on environmental risks and mitigating them when you go for a financing, whatever may be the source of fund. So this is the beginning, and at that time we established a separate department even to focus on that thing. We call it Sustainable Finance Department, and they have been relentlessly working on those issues. And already we have a Green Transformation Fund. Its size is 5,000 crore BDT. I don't want to go into the details because time will not permit for that one. So we have identified some priority sectors to finance under GTF. The rate of interest is around 5%. We already, issued a taxonomy and all the things for issuing green bonds. There are 8 sectors and 88 activities under this green bond taxonomy. And we also instructed our banks, our banking industry, to have a dedicated desk for their, managing their investments in a sustainable way. And also we have identified some major, areas where we provide refinance facilities through our partner banks and FIs. We identified almost 66 or 67 items that banks can invest and come to us for refinance. And the list is, growing. We revisit the lists on every year and so on. Besides our Sustainable Finance Department, we also look into the garment sector from other perspective also, as garments is, our largest export earning industry. And for that, we have different, type of financing support. We know that an entrepreneur always looks for the business case. So they are not, I'm sorry to say, they are not much interested in, investing in process improvement. And Mr. Bidura is smiling on me. Definitely he will talk on these issues. But we know we need to make it a business case. And to make this type of investments a business case, I just want to add a bit detail on a particular project. We have different projects like JICA-funded urban building and safety projects. But right now I'm going to talk a bit about SRIAP. We call it SRIAP. We support garments industries for mainly retrofitting and then for sustainable and for environmental and social upgradation. And this very unique nature of fund is, we call it unique because we not only provide financial support, we also provide our entrepreneurs through our partner banks and our technical supporters, the consultants, some sort of technical support also. They can come to us through them, and we help them, building their financial offer, their environmental mitigation plan, and blah, blah, blah. And not only that, we also manage to provide them some sort of grant. If any industry takes a loan from this window, they can have 10% of their principal amount to be repaid by a separate fund if the investment is for retrofitting. And if the investment are for environment and social upgradation, we will repay 20% of that principal amount. Thanks to our partner, I don't want to forget their names. AFD, French Development Agency, is providing us the credit line. And the grant amount we have been collecting from European Union and KfW. And also GIZ, Mr. Lange was here earlier from Textile Cluster of GIZ. They were a very important partner to us. We are working together, and 20 factories have already been, implemented the development activities. I just can't resist to mention 2-3 of the names. Mr. Miran Ali, supposed to be here. We financed Tarasima Apparels, we financed Snowtex, and many others. So many other industries are in the pipeline. We are working on that. So in brief, Bangladesh Bank is not, non-responsive to this countrywide need. And as we believe we are playing supporting role. The private sector entrepreneurs are, performing the lead role, but we are supporting in every way. You can come to us. We are very open to you. I think that will do for right now. I'll come back if...
Thank you very much. And we might come back to the business case we talked earlier on this morning about what does success look like. So maybe we look at the business case in a different way than we did before. Maybe we measure success in a different way than we did before. But now over to Mr. Nasser Essas Bijoy, the CEO of Standard Chartered Bank. Can you see and talk to your role in this transition to more renewable energy?
Thank you. The importance of climate change or ESG is no longer a discussion point. It is about how to address this, right? If you look at COP26, there were 90 global banks which participated, which accounts for almost 43% of the global banking assets. So the whole purpose is to come under the umbrella of Net Zero Transition Alliance, and there actually to decarbonize the portfolio of lending and investment by 2050. So it's no longer a discussion point whether we want to participate or not. It is we are all committed to do that. Now, let me just explain the landscape, because it is also about adaptation and mitigation. Because adaptation actually addresses the vulnerability of the impact of the climate change, and the mitigation addresses the reduction requirement of the climate change. Therefore, both are important. Both has actually opportunities for the banks for the right reasons. This is actually a purpose-led initiative. So on that particular place, let's say if you think about the adaptation, it is about getting the right, secure the safe and secure infrastructure. It is about agriculture, how you actually have a more flexible agriculture and climate resistant agriculture. Then about the evacuation plans. So all those are actually require financing. And just to give an example, that in our estimate, if by 2030 it will be $1.2 billion required for Bangladesh only. As we progress, the vulnerability goes up. Therefore, by 2030 it's 12.5. By 2050 it's going to be $59 billion of requirement. So there itself, a significant funding requirement will be there, and where banks will have to play an active part. Similarly, in mitigation, it's even bigger. If you look at the mitigation space, IFC did a review which shows that there are $172 billion requirement by 2040 alone. So that clearly shows this opportunity space. And how would you finance them, fund them? Because it's not only going to be financing, it will also be equity and other capital market products that will have to come to play. So the mitigation is obviously a bigger space where circularity almost account for 45%, but also the renewable energy and energy efficient industries, electronic vehicle, all those will play a role in addressing the mitigation part, right? So this we'll have to find out the sources of financing. So under Kyoto Protocol, there are obviously the Green Climate Fund, the Global Green Capital Fund is there, and then we have the Global Environment Fund. Multilaterals are there, bilaterals are there, capital market is obviously there. But apart from that, in Bangladesh, as Mr. Naushad mentioned about, Central Bank has a 5,000 crore refinancing window at 1% rate, and then banks can lend at 5%. But here, Equal is probably in a way significantly advantaged, because they have access to this Global Green Climate Fund, and I think it's only Equal and PKSF are the two entities which are currently eligible. I think if it can be broad-based, then it will actually help executing much faster. And to be, to accelerate the process, I think we need to also look at the policy framework, infrastructure to accelerate this process. So clearly there is significant opportunity. If you look at the global, I just have the number, let me quote the number. It's actually $2.36 trillion is the global, green bond market. So this is clearly a significant opportunity for banks to actually participate, and private sector as well. So capital market will be a very, very important participant if you want to really finance them.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And now over to Mr. Ahmed Shaheen, the Additional Managing Director of the Eastern Bank Limited. So what concrete activities do you do to support this transition?
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Nasir. already things are a little bit elaborated already. I would limit the position with the apparel industry here, since renewable energy or energy efficiency is a vast thing in other across the other industries and initiatives. But to be very specific with the apparel industries here, that we commercial banks do support the industries in terms of working capital mostly, but in Bangladesh we have a lot more role also in the project financing as well, which is unlike other parts of the world, since the commercial banks are only the established financial system here. So we need to do possible everything for our customers when they take an initiative and a project. More of it's like a general practitioner, not specialized. But coming to this renewable energy side and energy efficiency also related with this, it requires something more than the common funding. One is in the tenor, because the payback might be a longer, and the other is as much as finer in terms of cost. So in these two initiatives, we commercial banks a little bit are handicapped. We don't have any off-the-shelf product to match with this. But what we do, we try to source as much as possible from the other sources. Like the central bank has a fund in green fund already initiated here, which is much cheaper or cost competitive in terms of local currency. It will be costing only 5%. There is called specialized institutions. They are very focused on this. So what we can do, we can support our customers, that the customers are with us, the security arrangement, cash flow arrangement, everything with us. So we can take the credit risk. Where we can take refinance, we can channelize that. Then it gives the industries much finer in terms of pricing and also a matching tenor. Also having the call, the multilaterals available in this space, we can align more. So what our role can be much more is how much we can relate with the available other supports and how much we can securitize for those institutions to come to this space and relate with the fund, because there are a lot of funds already committed, but the challenge is to channelize and utilize that. Okay, so in this space, I think we commercial banks, not only Eastern Bank, and Eastern Bank as a bank, we are very much dedicated and focused on this to work on this. But to be very specific, we need to learn more things also as well. So this sort of initiatives is also is creating more awareness and also bringing more focus and attention. So that's at this stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now over to a manufacturing perspective. Vidura Alabhavar, Board Director of Sustainable Apparel Coalition, that's one hat. And then you're also the Executive Vice President of the EPIC Group Hong Kong. So wearing both hats, and you will decide who you are. You can be SAC in the first and then manufacturer. But where do you see, what are the biggest levers we need to pull to really succeed in this path toward the net zero economy?
Sure. Just to make it a little bit more complicated, I'll throw in a third hat. Before I became a corporate sustainability practitioner, I was a climate researcher. And if I use my climate researcher hat, I would say that we've already lost the war with climate crisis, because the current carbon limits is not sustainable for either human survival nor human prosperity. So what that asks us to do is, how fast do we have to run the race to net zero? And that ambition is what we should be governed. So that includes not just renewable energy, and a lot of the time the conversation is about renewable electricity, but we know our apparel industry uses quite a lot of thermal energy. So we're talking about renewable energy that supports our thermal, and also energy efficiency and other transitions that we have to make, everything from the way we make product to the products that we make. If you look at globally, this transition is actually turbocharged by the private sector. So states are moving towards decarbonization at a particular pace, But you will see the private sector has to run faster, partly because we can, partly because we must. Coming back to the lever, I would use a slightly different phrasing. I would say where is the biggest opportunity to rapidly decarbonize? And let me put this in context. As a company, we are attempting to halve our total carbon emissions by the end of this decade. At the same time that we are growing. So what does that mean? I have to halve my emissions in our operations. At the same time, I need to make sure that all my new factories are coming at net zero. So the opportunity we have is something we call collective action, because decarbonization of the value chain is a collective responsibility. It's not a manufacturer responsibility, it's not a brand responsibility, it's a collective responsibility. How we leverage the collective capability of the brands, manufacturers, the mills, the bankers, and everybody else. That's where the opportunity is, because all this time what we have been doing is trying to run this race as individuals. We as a company is trying to decarbonize, brands are doing something else, mills are doing something else. It's never a collective journey, so that's where the opportunity is. I just want to make 4 quick points. A lot of the time sustainable financing conversation is purely on debt. If you look at the amount of funding that is needed to decarbonize the apparel sector, it cannot be done through debt by the companies. Nor can countries like Bangladesh be able to do this purely on debt. Second one is risk. Who bears the risk? How do we de-risk it? How do we underwrite the risk? How do we manage securitization? Third one, sustainable funding. 2 key points. Is it affordable? Is it accessible? If you think about a lot of the sustainable financing instruments that's on the table are not accessible to the majority of the facilities. So how do we get the funds to where it is needed the most? Not to the companies like us, but to the companies who need it most. We spoke from the morning about just transition. What does just transition look like in this context? And this is something interesting. And the fifth one, how do we really, this conversation on funding is always about payback. How do we fund the long to no payback investments? At the same time, how do we take away, there are instruments for this. There are instruments such as, bad investment banks. How do we create these tools that can help fast track Bangladesh into a net zero economy? So these are the ones that we want to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's a good segue over to you. Mr. Ashish Damle, you're the country director of Oxfam. So from where you're sitting, what's missing when you go to work every day to secure a just transition?
Thank you, Martin. Oxfam's fundamental job is to listen to the people and amplify their voice and influence policies or policymakers, both nationally, regionally, and globally. And when we say people, it includes not only the communities where we work, but it also means the small-scale industries, small-scale entrepreneurs, medium-scale, the other entrepreneurs, private sector, and also the national government when we take these messages outside the country borders. When it comes to the transition to the green energy, we have added this word, or we focus on it, is just transition. That just is for us capital letters, bold and underline. And what do we mean by this is precisely that this transition is being influenced by the market forces, or it's organically evolving considering the limitation and strength that we have in the country. So for us, keeping the people and national interests at the center of this change is very important. And in that perspective, we do question, as Sir was also saying, that when it comes to finance in Bangladesh, which is the climate vulnerable recipient country, not because of its own deeds, because of the, the deeds that have happened in the West, then why should Bangladesh pay the cost for it? Why should the just transition cost or the finance is subjected to the debt? Why can't it be subjected to the compensation? And why cannot we fit it into the narrative of the damage and loss? So these are the aspects are part of our work on which we do research, we create dialogues, we create collaborations, and we would like to have this as collaborative efforts between not only within the organization or within the country here, but also with the West, that we have to explain them that yes, we will meet those standards, we will go towards that, but we would like to breathe in our own air with our own efforts at our own terms. And those needs to be negotiated, keeping the people at the center of those interests. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, all of you. So next, it's up to you out there to pick up your phones, look at the question that's in the Slido, and then vote. So we can get your answer up here on the big screen. And the question is, so here we have representatives from both financial institutions, business associations, manufacturers, NGOs discussing the role of green funding as a pathway to renewable energy. So please rank these in terms of their potential to secure more green funding. National government, private financial institutions, brands, manufacturers, or international development organizations. So let's see. We have a leader in public-private partnerships. Somebody listened to Vidura talking about collaboration, perhaps? A strong number second in the government national plans, and more on the public-private partnerships. More and more, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You have a winner, and you pick the winners out there now. So any comments from you, our dear panelists? Is this surprising to you, or? Yes.
Yeah, you see, public-private partnership, and ITCOL is an example of public-private partnership institution, and you see we have channelized $2.5 billion so far in renewable and energy efficient projects. So, and more in the pipeline. And what Ajaz Bhai told, that we are the national accredited entity of GCF, Green Climate Fund, and we have already approved $250 million fund for RMG and textile sector, not for solar rooftop, but also for energy efficient machineries. So the answer is right, I think. Public-private partnership is most required. Thank you.
Yes.
So I'm going to be a little bit contrarian here. I don't think that's where we need to go, and I'll contextualize this. We earlier spoke about how significant climate vulnerability is for Bangladesh. Bangladesh is not just apparel industry, and I'm speaking in the context of apparel industry. There are significant development, adaptation, and other needs that Bangladesh needs, and I would imagine the private-public partnership should be actually channeled to that. How does this industry decarbonize? I think we need to raise our own funding. I think we need to create the funding for our decarbonization through brand manufacturer collaborations. And there are instruments for this. We've been speaking for a while about something called a fair climate premium. That can be on the product, that can purely be going towards decarbonization of the value chain. We've seen models by some brands who are actually generating their own funds. H&M has a fund of $30 million per year for supply chain decarbonization. And there are other brands who are supposed to come on forward. Apparel Impact Institute is raising funds to decarbonize this. What I think we really need from the state is creating that enabling environment that allows this funding to come in, that helps the facilities to decarbonize. And that is partly that is on the financial sector. I think there's already quite a lot of positive sides on that, and there are new models. I mean, SRIAP is something that I really like because it just breaks away from the traditional interest-based debt funding mechanism. But there's a second part that is equally important for this, and that is this renewable energy integration to decarbonize the apparel sector does not work if the national grid does not change to absorb the renewable energy. So there are things that happen. So if we get funding from Green Climate Fund, all the multilaterals, that should really go to change the infrastructure that allows the private sector to run this race faster. Right? And my request to this industry, and I'm wearing both hats now, I'm wearing all three hats now, as a climate researcher, as a manufacturer, and as a director of Sustainable Apparel Coalition, we need to decarbonize faster than we think we can. And if you start thinking that you can do it faster, you'll actually decarbonize faster.
Yes.
In one line, it's basically, I think it clearly shows that the requirement is such, the reason is so compelling, that there is no one sector that will be important. It's actually every one of the sectors, including consumer, needs to behave in a manner that encourages the more sustainable behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just to qualify a little bit further, when we talk about the apparel sector, it is part of the larger ecosystem. Considering a particular sector and not considering the other factions of this ecosystem, that has a danger in terms of actually one bringing the change itself and also to then to prove and to create a space in that marketplace. So that is where I think we need to really concentrate on this whole ecosystem in such a way that even the people, the manufacturers, the small scale industry, the entire logistics supply chain is part of it.
Just one thing to repeat what I said earlier, that this is I think everybody's perception and understanding is correct, what we also perceive, that we need more collaboration. Collaboration to reach the goal. There are things in place, but we need more alignment. So we from the banks, the commercial banks, where the customers come first, so we need to work more, what we indicated, that how we can relate with the available resources elsewhere. So can we support like an one-stop service? Okay. So if we can do more, then alignment and resource allocation and resource availability will be much faster, and ultimately it will be helpful in the industry. So when industry takes a project, it needs to complete in time. So whatever best available, that we need to source. So we commercial banks can play this role, and we are trying this and we are aiming this. Thank you very much.
Just to reiterate and add, yes, public-private partnership or collaboration is happening in our country, but not at a very fast pace. So bring it on pace, you need government plans and support. And we cannot forget international partnership, not only with the development partners, but also we should include the brands, because our main destinations are in USA and the Europe. So they can be left out, as Mr. Javed Imran has been saying in his opening remarks. So I think these are okay, but you cannot separate it and pick one. That's it.
So we've talked about, and it's on the sign over there, that the future is now. The climate change is not something into the distant future. So if we close our eyes and open it again, it's now 2024. We're sitting here again. It's the same panel. You're back. And today you committed to something. So that next year I'll be asking you, so what did you do in that last year? So what have you done in this last year, imagining we're in 2024? Any comments on things that you would like to commit to, that you can see will make a difference already in a year from now? I know it's a tough one, but we also need to be very tangible. It's big things, but we need to act now. Yes?
No, I think, clearly this is one of the important stands. We, as a Standard Chartered Bank, we have 3 stands, and accelerating net zero is number 1 stand that we have. It also includes the uplifting participation. So therefore, clearly, this is a priority for not only in Bangladesh, but for the group as a whole. And we are extremely committed in terms of not only financing, but also building awareness, working with, this forum to actually, we are looking at circularity. How can we promote circularity? So there will be a series of actions that will be seen by the market from Standard Chartered Bank and also from Foreign Investor Chamber of Commerce, that we believe all of us together are in it for a better future for Bangladesh.
So if all goes well, if I sit here, if I'm assuming that I'm going to sit here next year, there will be at least one new sustainable financing model in Bangladesh that we will support. And there will be, and that's talking as EPIC, and talking as Sustainable Apparel Coalition, I think there will be a model of collective action that brings brands and manufacturers and the mills together to collectively work on this without passing excessive burden to one part of the supply chain, one part of the value chain. So I think those two, I'll be proud if I can come and say that, but that's where we're working towards.
Just to add, yes, definitely Mr. Nasser Ejaz Vijay, the CEO of Standard Chartered, already cleared this thing that it's a continuous process. We need to improve ourselves not on the organizational level only, but also to personal level. As if you can recall, today's plenary session regarding the climate change, Dr. Salimul Haq was present here, and he just add one thing, that not only as the institutional or organizational level, you need also to focus on the individual level, because everybody has to do their part rightly. Maybe a very little insignificant when you talked about individuals' contribution, but when you sum up this thing, it brings a result. That's it. And just to be share with you that as I am a finance guy practicing with some financial models and challenges, I did a certification course on Frankfurt School of Management for Sustainable Finance. So it's very insightful. So I'm trying to bring or keep myself updated what is happening in the finance area. I cannot be expert on everything, on sustainability, but sustainable finance, I should be, I think, keep myself updated to work on that area and contribute, even it's a little.
Thank you very much. Ashish?
Yeah, I think Oxfam is committed for bringing the damage and loss compensation at the center of this green financing discourse. And by 2024, we are definitely confident to at least bring the key players together on one page to create that strong narrative for Bangladesh.
To be very precise on your question, that what will be the difference from today and 2024 if we again sit here. Okay. So from our part, we'll take more initiatives on collaborating with the available resources, with Central Bank, with ITCOL, and with the multilaterals who are working in this space also. We are also already in talk. And what best possible way we can find to support the initiatives more and quickly. So that will, we hope, will create more impact and initiatives more visible in the industry. Thank you.
We are continuously updating ourselves. We know, we understand government has we have long target in renewable energy, and we are striving to achieve some footprint in there. So this year we have restructured our renewable energy team, and we have going through some policy updates. So we are continuously updating ourselves to provide the best services to the market, to the industry. And you know, we have a field team, we have technical team to support this renewable energy. And we are also working with collaboration with others, like commercial banks. They can come up with providing guarantees to the in terms of credit enhancement. So in that way, we are working all possible ways so that in 2024 we can say that we had 2023. Thank you.
So we're coming to an end. I just want to give all of you the opportunity to give a final advice to the people out there. If they're struggling to secure green funding, what would be the key things you're looking for from them, where you want to jump at them and say, hey, I want to be the one who actually gives you the money because I can see the business case. Any final word of advice to the people in the room?
I can chip in. Just I would like to say that those who you haven't started your rooftop solar project, please come forward and come to us. We have our colleagues here. You can talk to them. And yes, one thing you may know or may not know that 1 kilowatt hour of rooftop is less than that of government bill of PDV. So you can easily do your rooftop solar projects, which is viable, economically viable. Thank you.
So I think, we have done a survey and the international brands have clearly said that from 75% of them said that they will start removing, suppliers who are not committed to net zero transition plan from 2025. So it's just 2 years away. Therefore, it is important for us to collaborate. So you should actually engage conversation with the international brands as well and the financial institutions, and you together, let's forge a partnership to see how we can actually deliver a much more harmonized, a very quick product that we can actually help you to finance the products.
I think my message would be is that we have a lot of traditional financing products, even in the sustainable financing space. And I think if you look at the scale of climate crisis and what we need to do to address, business as usual ain't going to cut it. So we need to create new models, new ways of financing, and we've been doing quite a lot of it, and we were using 2 principles in every time we structure a new one. Can we do something new that does not exist? So there is a part of innovation. And second thing at the same time, can it be scaled so that it's not just coming to Epic, but it can be used by others? So I think invitation is to look at the problems fairly deeply and say what type of instruments that are needed, because there's a huge space for financial innovation to take this country and the whole world towards the net zero world.
Just to add that as the final words for today, we have been responding to the market. When we first designed SRIA project, we offered the product at maximum 7% of interest rate. But when country average interest rate becomes lower, we, maintaining all the bureaucracy, we bring down the interest rate on 5%. So we are responding, and this is a pilot project, but still we have space. Garments industries, apparel industries, those want to improve their processes maintaining sustainability, they can come to us through our partner banks. And also, as a good news I want to share, 1st of March this month, we had a long meeting with our project team, including our Honorable Governor and AFD's senior executives. Probably there will be a much bigger second credit line targeting not only garments and apparel industries, also other productive sectors of the country. So facilities are there, but you need to explore and you need to come to us. We are there to help you, to serve you. That's it.
Thank you. And the final word?
Okay. I think when we talk about the transition, it is for the future generation. But our word is that not at the cost of our present generation either. So keep the people at the center of this change. Thank you.
I think this is a beautiful way to end this. We want progress for the future generation, but not at the cost of the present. Thank you very much for all your great inputs.
Thank you very much for the session. We will conclude it by taking a group photograph, requesting the speakers to kindly stand together. Dear audience, before proceeding for the next agenda, we would like to share with you some special messages of the Voice of Worker representatives. Let's have the video on the screens.
My name is Amidul Haq Amin. I am the President of National Garment Workers Federation. In Bangladesh, garments, this is actually the biggest industrial sector. We are actually working for the betterment of the workers, garment workers in Bangladesh, and we are also thinking how this industry will be sustainable in Bangladesh and how this industry can get its good image in the international community. In reality, there are a lot of initiatives, like you see earlier from the branch, they have their own code of conduct. After that, there is the accord for the betterment of this industry, for the sustainability of this industry. Besides the workers' OS, workers' right, nowadays we also, the industry also need to address the environmental issue, the climate issue. At the same time, the industry also need to address the automation or digitalization issue. I hope that we all together, with the worker side, trade union side, as well as industry, government, civil society and branch, we all together, we will be able to a sustainable apparel industry in Bangladesh. Thank you again.
My name is Shakil Akhtar Chaudhary. I am the General Secretary for Bangladesh Labour Federation, which is one of the mainstream trade union organization in the country. By ensuring justice and humanity workplace, it is possible to ensure the better business, the profitability of the industry. By ensuring this social dialogue and freedom of association, I think everything will be possible for to ensure the harmonic industrial relationship. I think from this forum, this message could be given more loudly to respect again the workers and the harmonic industrial relation. To achieve our targets for sustainable development goal, we need everyone on board for their improvement, for their economic development, and nobody will left behind. I hope this forum will contribute very positive role to ensuring human rights, workers' rights as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, now we will have a presentation on advancing decent work in Bangladesh, human right due diligence. This segment will be presented by Mr. Saeed Fazli Niaz, Team Lead, Better Work, Bangladesh, ILO. Duration of this presentation will be 10 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Saeed Fazli Niaz for his presentation.
Good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum everyone. So I'll be a bit conscious and respectful to the bells that keep ringing, and that will be very brief. I'll try to keep it in 10 minutes. So we will be also accessible and open for further questions if I don't cover any critical aspect of it. So as you can see, advancing decent work in Bangladesh, human rights due diligence. So this is very intricately and indispensably interconnected. So this is why I think ILO as an overall, we have made it a mandate that we will be working towards this more and more. So very, very quickly, what is it? Because sometimes when we say human rights due diligence, it feels like this is very self-explanatory. Okay, human rights, we do due diligence. And sometimes it feels like, okay, what is it all about? What do I have to do? How is it relevant for me? Can you tell me more? So I will try to give you a little bit of definition. It says enterprise directly so that it feels more relevant for us. So it's a way for enterprises to proactively, bit of an operative word here, manage potential and actual adverse human rights impacts with which they are involved. So that's how you are relevant for that. And if we talk about major 3 areas, this particular area is coming a little bit from the United Nations guiding principles, but I thought that would be a little bit easier for us to kind of connect how does it involve. So first we start with the protection. And that mostly goes to the state for them to do and help us and support us to do everything that we as enterprises or the supply chain or the business or the owners can take all those instruments and ride ahead of those curves. Respect, something that also comes with the government that, we have heard since this morning, like everybody said, people need to respect the regulations, people need to respect the policies and all these legal frameworks for this to work. So that starts with the respect for the laws, respect for the human rights. And there is a bit of a difference between the human rights due diligence and human rights due diligence law. I'll go into that very soon. And respect is where I think enterprises and the business are mostly relevant, that you have to respect. This is a corporate responsibility to make sure that you are doing your job right. And sometimes, if I may say, even if there is no legal framework at place, you may be still subject to those kind of requirements. And of course, it doesn't work if there is no access to remedy. Everything is there, legal framework there. We want to respect human rights due diligence. We want to respect human rights. But what if things don't go the way it should all the time? Where is the access of remedy? So that is something also very, very critical pillar or aspect of the human rights due diligence. We can go into the detail, maybe not for now, but just quickly drop a note that this can have like judicial, non-judicial, informal, formal, many forms. So we don't have to really look at one single avenue to think about remedy. A question, why now? I will go into the next slide also to see human rights due diligence as a concept, as a requirement, as an ask by all the government, international organizations, and the civil societies over the years have always been there. We will see, maybe I will go to the next slide and then come back here. As you can see, the ILO Tripartite Declarations for Principles, we shortly call it M&E Declaration. We have United Nations Guiding Principles. We have OECD guidelines. These are three major instruments that many of us know about, and these talk directly about human rights due diligence and responsible business conduct. The first one, even the M&E ILO one, has been since the 70s, late 70s. So it has been decades that we have had these guidelines, we have had these directives in a way for us to follow. But somewhere we have also learned that it doesn't really work all the time. There are guidelines, so okay, this is how you do it, this is what you can do. But where is the urgency? How do you make sure, and how do we make sure that everybody along the supply chain, labor rights, human rights, all together are being respected? And on the process of making profit, nobody is costing human rights and human lives. So where do we make sure that it happens? And the legal framework, of course, doesn't always give you that protection all the time, but that's a good start. So that's where I think it's creating a bit of an urgency by, I think we have heard this about in the previous sessions, that European Union's proposed mandatory due diligence law directive, and we already have the HRDD law of France, Netherlands, Switzerland, Norway, and Germany. These are already in place. The EU due diligence is proposed and potentially to be active anytime soon. I kept Japanese guidelines on responsible supply chain because this is still a soft law, but just to maybe give a signal that even if it is a soft law, and I do not speak on behalf of anyone, but this is a very, very clear momentum where the global supply chain and the market economy are going. So unless we take care of these things, maybe it's going to be very, very challenging, if I wear my Bangladeshi hat for a second, to keep our global competitiveness as we want this to be. We talked about this. So I already talked about this. So why urgent? Is it urgent for me? So maybe simple 3 questions that you can start asking. So as I was saying, human rights due diligence has been applicable, is applicable for everyone, everywhere. But okay, how do we create the urgency? Maybe a good question to start with, do I export? To where? If I take Bangladesh for a second, do I export? Because sometimes I can be from an industry and the human rights due diligence is still applicable for me, but maybe not now that urgency. If you do it, great, but that urgency is coming from the fact the mandatory laws coming soon and already in place that I just showed you. Do you export? Where do you export to? For example, if it's Europe or a European country that already has enacted a law, that's exactly now urgency for you. That's, I think, very simple and clear. Timeline and preparedness, I'm not going to be able to go into any detail, but something that you can also think about. So where are these laws? When are these coming? How is it applicable? So if I have a buyer coming from Europe, so okay, does that change any dynamic of the relationship that I have had with my buyer? So they have had all the COCs, the code of conducts for like last 4 decades. So is it the same thing? Does it change? When? So please, this is something I just wanted to trigger as a question for the forum. And of course, the next panel discussion will be based on that. So this is something as a context I'm building to just give it over to the next panel moderator. Coming at the nearly end is like, just a reminder, is like maybe due diligence is nothing new. This is a very important message that I want to re-emphasize. Due diligence is nothing new. So due diligence is a process. We have done it. We have known this. Sometimes we have failed to probably do exactly the way it should be, but it has always been there. Now we have to do more. We have heard this since this morning. No, less talk, more walk, right? We have heard this. So that we'll have to do. And just to maybe give another clarity is like, simple process like, okay, I need to identify where the gaps are. If I want to prevent, what do I prevent? How do I become proactive? Because we saw you have to proactively manage as an enterprise. Okay, how do I do that? So I have to also mitigate and remedy because not everything is in my control, circle of influence. How do I find out where things are? And then how do I make sure I transparently communicate at every possible level? And every possible level meaning also essentially workers' voice. How do I make sure those process owners at every possible levels are being heard, consulted, and made sure that they're part of it, the decision-making process necessarily. So that much I had. So I don't know, there will be like 1 trillion question, I imagine. So I'm open to that. Anytime you want to catch up later. But this is a good time, I think. I want to hand it over to the next panel discussion. If I can have the MC also help this with me. I want to mention this because, the next conversation will be very much built onto it. So it doesn't cover everything, but just to give it a little bit of, elements to help that with. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Said Fazli Niaz. The apparel and textile industry in Bangladesh employs over 4 million workers, the majority being women. The mandatory human rights due diligence was introduced in response to the persistent human rights concerns, including poor working conditions, low wages, and exploitations of workers. A greater industry awareness on the importance of HRDD is instrumental to its success. The HRDD can only be effectively implemented with a collective concerted effort from the Bangladesh government, international organizations, and companies operating in the industry. Now we are moving into the last plenary session of this forum, mandatory human rights due diligence. I would like to request Dr. Bernard Spanier, Deputy Head of Delegation of the European Union in Bangladesh, to please come up to take his seat on stage. I would also like to request Mr. Faiz Murshid Qazi, Director General, Economic Affairs Wing, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, to come up as well. I would like to request Ms. Leena Khan, Labor Attaché, U.S. Embassy in Bangladesh, to please come up. requesting Mr. Andrew Martin, Executive Vice President of Sustainable Apparel Coalition, to come up, requesting Mr. Ruairid McCarthy, Head of Partnership Development of WaterAid UK, to come up. And finally, I would like to request Ms. Jasmine Malik Chua, Sourcing and Labor Editing Sourcing Journal, to please come up as well. And to moderate the session, I would like to request Mr. Mohammad Anis Agung Nugroho, Program Manager of Better Work Bangladesh, to please come up.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon. I hope it's still morning because I'm expecting some energize as well from the participants. Thank you so much for having us today. Unfortunately, we are still waiting for Mr. Fayaz, representing government of Bangladesh. Today we have a panel session with very the one who knows very well about the mandatory human rights due diligence. And I think I want to also explain a bit why ILO and one of his program, Better Work, is actually working on the human rights due diligence, because all of this regulation is actually also referred to the ILO convention. Yeah, that's why we are promoting it. We are also working on it, and we also help the industry to comply with the regulation. In the 45 minutes, I will ask, hopefully, 2 rounds of questions. The first question will be different according to your background and expertise, but in the second round, we will have asking you what is your suggestion in general to Bangladesh government, Bangladesh business and workers to address the new mandatory human rights due diligence. But let me start with Bern. Bern, how is all of this conversation now is because of the new EU directive on the due diligence. Where is it now? Was it coming? What is new? And yeah, what is it different to what previously we have? Please.
Okay, thank you, and pleasure to be here, and Anis, to answer your question. First, let me make a statement. I mean, I believe that international supply chains are good for economic development. Coming from an organization, we're not a Marxist organization, not at all. I believe that globalization and supply chains have brought millions out of poverty in the past decades, and have benefited people all over the world. The EU itself is basically trade is in the EU's DNA. We are pretty much a trade organization when we came into being. So in general, I believe this is a good thing. Globalization, supply chains, as a starter. But let's face it, international supply chains have also been blamed for having many negative effects on people and the environment. And what I mean by that is that some suppliers have adopted a race to the bottom pricing strategy. And this is among the reasons why supply chains have, to a certain extent, came into disregard, have become a bad reputation. And for a long time, early 2000s, the buzzword in business and international economy was self-regulation. And the logic behind self-regulation was that multinational companies, if they applied a voluntary code of conduct on due diligence, and they would do that because of reputational issues. And that was a bit like the mantra for quite a long time. And then Rana Plaza happened, 2013. And recently we had the pandemic. And that reminded us repeatedly that voluntary codes of conduct do not work. And in Europe, NGOs and trade unions have repeatedly said that. And they've been pointing this out for a long time. As a result, the EU, let's say better late than never, has come up with its due diligence directive at international level, because we believe that international trade and supply chains needs rules. So the new EU directive was presented in February last year, and it defines binding rules for everyone. And this in both the social and in the environmental sector. And more importantly, it's mandatory in its application. So since it's legally binding, brands and buyers from the EU and third countries can be held accountable for their suppliers and also bear responsibility for the consequences of their suppliers' treatment of workers and the environment. So what does the directive do? Companies will have to assess their supply chains at least once a year or ahead of major business decisions, and they have to comply with requirements that relate to, let's say, forced labor, child labor, inadequate workplace safety, and environmental impacts. Some sectors, such as the garment sector, agriculture, forestry, and minerals are subject to particular vigilance, given that these sectors have a long history of violating labor and environmental standards, unfortunately. Now, if companies fail to comply, penalties and legal actions would follow. So this, in a nutshell, is what the EU Due Diligence Directive is all about. It's difference in the voluntary schemes like we have seen from the UN, from the ILO, and from OECD. We want to make these rules mandatory and legally enforceable. Thank you.
Thank you, Bern. That's why some experts also call it like hard laws, yeah, because it will be binding and mandatory. We are going to have a little bit of interaction, but we will not showing now. So the team in the behind, do you mind to show the Twitter account that you can follow? And you can also ask the question so through Twitter. We will not be able to respond now, but Bern, for example, has been very active on Twitter, and everyone here also have a Twitter. We even do a Twitter this morning. I saw some of you. So if you have any question, you can just drop a Twitter, mention them, mention all of this account, and then, yeah, they will respond on Twitter. Farouk Bhai, from the screen, can you show the Twitter account? Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Here's the Twitter account, yeah. Please tag them and then ask the question there. Now, I'm going to go to Rurit McCarthy because water is also a human right. But what we want to ask today is, so far everyone, although the conference is focusing on the garment and RMG, but what can this industry learn from other industry? Yeah.
Thank you, Enis, and thank you to the organizers for putting on this fantastic event and having us here to speak. My name is Rory McCarthy. I'm here with WaterAid. WaterAid's probably marginally less well known than the EU, so a bit of an introduction. We're an international NGO working in 34 countries globally, and our mission is to ensure that everyone everywhere has access to clean water, decent toilets, and good hygiene. WaterAid's entry point into this topic of mandatory human rights stems from the fact that in 2010, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution that said that the human rights to water and the human rights to sanitation are not only fundamental human rights, but they're also essential to the full enjoyment of life and all other rights. It's been 13 years since that resolution was made, and we sit at the midway point between the date we set and the date we aim to achieve, the UN SDGs. But yet, 2 billion people in the world don't have access to clean water. 3.6 billion people don't have a toilet of their own at home. And WaterAid believes in the power of partnerships to solve these challenges. Partnerships with communities, partnerships with government, partnerships with other NGOs, and partnerships with the private sector. And before I touch on your question, I just think it's a point to acknowledge the progress that's been made on this topic in this sector in Bangladesh. WaterAid is deeply appreciative of the policies that have been put in place by the Bangladesh government that align to the human right to water and sanitation. And similarly, through the Labour Act in 2015, the policies put in place for the private sector about what that means for the use of water within industry. So, rights to abstraction of groundwater, access to clean water for workers. And equally, as we can see, the private sector has been putting these policies into practice, and credit where credit is due. We've seen a lot of progress. But to touch on your point about learnings from other industries, WaterAid works a lot with the agriculture industry as well as the apparel sector. The agriculture industry is responsible for 70% of freshwater withdrawals globally. Massive water user, huge risk as we're seeing variable rainfall and other shocks related to climate change. And one of the key commodities that we work with is the tea sector, and they have their own plethora of challenges that are related to them. One of them being they have a large workforce that are often low paid and have lack of access to being able to realize their rights. We work with tea estates in India, Kenya, but also here in Bangladesh. And WaterAid's work with the tea plantations in Bangladesh has been to help tea picker workers to understand and advocate for their human rights to water and sanitation, whilst simultaneously working with the landowners and tea plantation managers to understand and appreciate more the benefits that their business will have from actually from their workers being happy and healthy and having access to these resources. WaterAid has, through this work, reached 45,000 people in 21 tea plantations. That's 45,000 people that were being denied their right to human water and sanitation, and businesses that they were employing that were exposed to that risk. And the learning here that I think for the apparel industry is that use your workers, listen to your workers, let them advocate for their rights, protect their human rights for them and their families, but also to protect your business. Because by tackling these issues, you're protecting your business from any potential repercussions that may or may not come from existing or upcoming legislation that's being put in place. So yeah.
Thank you, Rit. I'm moving now to Lina Khan, Labor Attaché of the U.S. Embassy in Bangladesh. When it's emerging, you know, I try to learn a little bit. Is it really new? Is there any older law that are implemented so far? And then I heard about this information in the other country where the U.S. government actually has we don't call it like mandatory human or HRDD laws, but actually you have a law that prohibits importing any product that was mined, produced, manufactured by forced labor, including child labor. So what is U.S. experience on this law, please?
Thank you very much, Anis, and it's a real pleasure for me to be here today to speak on this panel. And just to start out, you know, globally we are seeing this trend towards from voluntary to mandatory due diligence on labor rights, human rights, the environment, which I think is really incredibly encouraging and positive. And just to start off, I just think it's important for any discussion around mandatory human rights due diligence to really first and foremost keep in mind the ILO fundamental conventions on freedom of association, collective bargaining, prevention of forced labor, child labor, discrimination, and ensuring a safe workplace. As you correctly mentioned, in the US we do have a law. We have aspects of mandatory due diligence, particularly in relation to trade enforcement. The US Department of Labor, where I come from, enforces strong labor protections in our free trade agreements, such as the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, as well as through our trade preference programs, such as the Generalized System of Preferences. And we also have the Tariff Act of 1930, as well as the Uyghur Forced Labor Protection Act, the UFLPA. So what is the background of the US Tariff Act? Well, first of all, prohibiting the importation of goods made with forced labor is a key component of the Biden administration's worker-centered trade policy. But the US has prohibited the import of goods made with convict labor since 1890. And in 1930, our US Congress expanded this prohibition to Section 307 of the Tariff Act, and that includes products made with forced labor. The US Customs Border Protection Agency, also known as the CBP, they are responsible for enforcing Section 307 of the Tariff Act. And through this law, the US has been working to counter labor abuses globally, preventing goods made with forced labor from entering US commerce. And the Tariff Act is also responsible for holding companies accountable for violating labor rights around the world. And I just wanted to mention that since 2015, the CBP has increasingly used Section 307 of the Tariff Act, given the heightened attention and scrutiny to worker rights in the trade policy space. As far as how is the U.S. enforcing this law, well, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, they enforce the law through investigations and by issuing a withhold release order, also known as a WRO. Either an individual or an organization may petition to the CBP alleging forced labor in the production of certain goods. There is a relatively low evidentiary threshold, so this remedy is quite accessible. I don't know if you'd be interested in data around this issue, but in case folks are wondering about the number of countries and companies that have been investigated or sanctioned by this law, there is information on both of those aspects on the cbp.gov website. I just wanted to mention that there are currently 53 active withhold release orders against specific companies from 11 different countries. I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you, Lina. Yeah, that was experience from the USA, who has this law since 1930, but then implemented in 2015. If you have question to Bern, Rorit, or Lina, please mention their Twitter account. Do you mind to show again the Twitter account, just to make sure that you know that we are going to have an interactive session through social media? Yeah. Please show it on the screen again. And then I move now to Andrew Martin. Okay, now we have a new law. I mean, coming soon, yeah, and which will impact to the supply chain, not only the garments, but it's beyond garment as well. Andrew, what is the discussion and reaction among the member of SAC? Are they excited? Are they? What do they see? How do they see about this? Yeah, do you mind to give us some intel from inside, please?
Okay, yeah. So we're amongst friends, okay? So whatever I tell you, don't repeat outside of this room. No, thank you for that. Firstly, thank you very much for the invite. Fantastic job, Sustainable Apparel Forum and Mustafi. So really privileged to be here. What's the conversation? I think I'm sort of jumping the question. We have had members starting, obviously, talking a lot about it, coming together, talking to us. It's like anything. We represent nearly 45% of the industry. So we have a variety of members at different stages in the journey. We have a variety of members, some of whom have due diligence processes in place, some of which are really at the beginning of the journey. And they're all coming at it from slightly different aspects. I think one of the things I would say is a voluntary initiative, and we're saying it more and more, we actually really welcome the more approaches to mandatory regulation, because it creates a much clearer framework, a much clearer level playing field for people. So as an organization, and I would say a lot of our members are really welcoming good mandatory due diligence regulation. The conversations that are going on are quite mixed. There's a few conversations, one of which is around some who are more progressive are actually saying, okay, what does this mean for our resources? Does it mean we're going to be moving to more compliance and away from some of the work that we're already doing? What do we need to do to get there? What are the solutions that are out there to help us, support us in delivering on the due diligence regulation and looking for solutions? To which my response very often is, and I think this is an interesting journey for the voluntary initiatives, is we've done so much, had some success, nowhere near enough success, nowhere near, but have some. Some of that success has come in creating tools, methodologies, frameworks based on things like the ILO conventions, the UN guiding principles, the OECD guidelines. So in some ways, some of the methods and the tools are there to be able to accelerate this. If we actually, some of the tools are there if we get the regulation right. So I think that's one piece that's happening. I think there's a concern around ensuring that the regulation that finally hits, and whether it's the EU corporate sustainability, or as I heard it in the OECD meeting the other week, CSDDD is apparently what I heard for the first time. Whether it's that or the due diligence regulation, there are certain things that are critical. That is making sure that it does follow those guidelines. It is risk-based and not ambiguous. I mean, there's some ambiguous language at the moment around relationship-based rather than risk-based. I think it does align, which leads me to the alignment piece. And the other thing that's become more important for the SAC, because the SAC represents brands, retailers, and manufacturers, is that actually the focus on purchasing practices within the context of due diligence is actually critical, and making sure that's there. We actually sent a note to, signed a joint letter with Fairwear Foundation, Amfori, STTI, ETI, and Transformers Foundation, really requesting these things, including we need to have something on purchasing practices. The SAC's just launched our latest HIG BRM, brand and retail module, for the brands and retailers, where we've collaborated with a common framework on purchasing practices to try and make sure there's some alignment on that. And I think that's going to be critical in there. There was a couple of other things I wanted to quickly say. You jump me if I still got a minute. Good. I think, I think actually the last thing I'll close with on that question is when it comes to regulation, and this comes again and again and again, harmonization, again and again. Harmonization, and we heard it this morning, and I'm going to cheat and use some quotes from this morning, which were Salim from KDS. Firstly, harmonization and practical implementable regulation. Salim from KDS said, government's responsibilities is to ensure that parties can comply on due diligence regulation. Farouk from BGMEA said, his wish list, we do not want country-specific regulation. We need convergence across countries and regions. It's essential. We need to create a level playing field, and we need purchasing practices to be standardized. I think that piece around harmonization is so important because it then means, it actually sets a bar for everybody. It means there's a level playing field. It means that people are actually working from the same place, and there is nowhere to escape. One concern I do have at the moment, and it's an ongoing one that we have often with the EU regulations, this is a directive. And as a directive, there is the possibility for different interpretations. I think it's a big step forward, but I think you might be surprised, the SAC, we'd be wanting this to be actually full regulation and not a directive, because the directive creates the possibility for, what was it, a critic of ours called the a minestrone of approaches, that you could have different approaches to how it's interpreted. So, harmonization and practical implementable. So that's kind of the conversations we've got going on. It's happening. We need to make it work because it's critical.
Thank you, Andrew. I will ask Bern response, if possible, after Yasmin on the harmonization, clear directive. But Yasmin, I've just checked your Twitter and you pin one of the tweet that every fashion story is a labor story, right? So let's see how you're passionate about fashion and also labor story. But looking at the RMG industry, who has been heavy with audit as an audit industry since beginning 2000s, what do you see so far since 2000 until 2022? Do you agree with Andrew, for example, that there has been a lot of tools, methodology, success, but I think Bern also mentioned that the voluntary work is not as good as need something further. Do you see that this is already in the track? Are we on the right direction, do you think? Please.
Okay, let me try to there are a few things there, so I'm trying to parse them all. I feel like a bit of an imposter because I speak to experts. I'm not an expert myself because I'm just a journalist. But let's start with what we talk about voluntary mechanisms. I think a lot of what we consider human rights due diligence is already on the cards. It's in the UN guiding principles and the OECD, but what we lack is a method of enforcement. And I think that's where legislation can come in. And something that, in my experience, that comes up a lot is the topic of wages. I write a lot about garment workers because, you know, we talk about supply chain risks and supply chain mitigation, but the supply chain isn't just products, it's people. And that's something I feel very strongly about. Wages, chronically low wages, have been a real sticking point right now. I know that people I've spoke with and on the NGO side say that, you know, low wages, they're a feature, they're why this industry can go on the way it can with this constant race to the bottom. And I know with the directive, there is a sense that living wages and incomes should be included because they're a human right, right? Everyone has the human right to a living wage. But we also know that meeting minimum wages can be a challenge. You know, we're talking about post-COVID, we're in the middle of a global economic crisis, and then as Andrew said, purchasing practices are a driving factor. I just wanted to bring up a study in January. The University of Aberdeen and Transform Trade published a survey of 1,000 manufacturers from Bangladesh, and they found that 76% were selling at the same price in December 2021 than they were in March 2020, despite the rising cost of raw materials. 8% were doing for less than they cost to make. And we're talking about major retailers. I'm not gonna name and shame right now, but they're exactly who you would expect. As a result, 1 in 5 of the manufacturers said they struggle to pay the minimum wage. So if we're at that stage now where we can't even meet that goalpost, how are we going to get to a living wage? And that is something that I think the industry really needs to grapple with. And I think it does come down to purchasing practices. In New York, for example, we have a bill that's in the work. It's called the Fashion Sustainability and Social Accountability Act that will affect retailers making at least $100 million in revenue. And it's now including a requirement for responsible purchasing practices. So I know there's a real appetite to see this in the EU as well. I think I shall stop there unless you want me to keep going. I could probably just go on.
Yeah, but do you think the new conversation, the emerging mandatory human rights due diligence, is on the right track as well to help all of those problems?
I know it's a start, right? It's a start, but there has been some criticisms from NGOs. I know there's one concern that the requirements of the directive with the threshold that it's at, that it might just cover 1% of businesses. And there is a real fear that as it moves down the legislative process, it will get watered down. So I think that's still, you know, to be determined. I spoke with Laura Walters, the Dutch MEP who drafted the report that became the basis for the directive. She said that what worries her most is that the directive becomes a paper tiger. She said the worst thing we could do is make a law that essentially takes us a step back. And so I think as the negotiations carry through, I think it's really important to remember this, and there are sources of improvement that the NGOs have brought up, like you know, a mechanism for redress for rights holders who have been victimized. You know, are they able to? Are authorities during the investigation process, are they engaging with workers and their representatives? You know, giving the workers their voice. Access to justice is really important, as well as lowering the burden of proof and protecting whistleblowers, because retaliation is a very strong concern among garment workers.
Retaliation, yeah.
Yeah, And I think one final piece that recently came up during International Women's Day is that the directive should be gender responsive, because you know, women especially are more likely to rely on semi-formal or informal relationship schemes, unofficial subcontracting, and home-based work, and those relationships are not currently covered by the directive. So that's something that could be taken into account as well.
Yeah, thank you, Yasmin. And I think, yeah, welcome, Mr. Fayaz. Yeah, sorry we start already, but I think it's a good on timing as well, because I think now we are in the second round of the question, and it will be, the question is about, to the panel, is about what is the suggestion to Bangladesh government, business and workers to address the emerging mandatory human rights due diligence. And I would like to invite Lina first to respond, and then we would like to have last comments from Mr. Fayaz at the end. Yeah, please, Lina.
Well, thank you very much for the question.
Please, Lina.
Thank you. I think, you know, the post-pandemic environment has really shined a spotlight on the need for all stakeholders, governments, businesses, and trade unions to work together, not just to come together, but to work better to address labor violations in our globally connected supply chains. Starting with the government of Bangladesh, I would recommend, first of all, strengthening the enabling environment for labor protections. And that would be through labor law reforms that are ongoing right now, through the Bangladesh Labor Act, as well as through the Export Processing Zone Labor Act. And importantly, implementation, ensuring that trade unions are actually able to register and without fear of retribution or reprisal, and as well as enforcement of the labor laws through labor inspections. I think strong protections are also necessary to communicate more broadly to the international community that Bangladesh can be a real leader when it comes to strong labor rights. And that would not only help prevent future issues around sanctions, but also would unlock greater economic opportunities. For businesses, I would say that as the US and the EU are moving toward creating a more equal playing field through due diligence and strengthened enforcement mechanisms, we would like to see the development of a legally binding and enforceable agreement between brands, suppliers, and worker organizations. And I would just like to briefly mention the 2022 Dindigul Agreement from Tamil Nadu, which was an enforceable binding agreement and really a great example of collaboration between an international brand, suppliers, and unions to address gender-based violence and improve labor rights in the garment sector. And then also I just wanted to highlight that as a result of that binding agreement, the US Customs Border Protection found that the supplier had actually addressed the concerns around forced labor, and they lifted the WRO against the manufacturer. So I think that's a really interesting example that
so it's also bring benefit as well,
exactly.
Yeah, when you can address it rightly. Thank you, Lina.
Thank you.
Bern.
Yeah, there's one point I wanted to make. There's a much bigger picture to due diligence than just compliance. It's about reputation. It's about branding. And take the example of Rana Plaza, which was pretty much 9/11 for Bangladesh, and you know the reputational damage it done. What did Bangladesh do? What did the buyers do? We had the accord. We had major improvements. So you had this disaster, but you turned it around. So where are we now? Bangladesh is now world leader in green factories. And I'm thinking, in due diligence, why not do the same? Why not become a world leader in due diligence? Why not? This is a reputational issue and a branding opportunity. And I just want to stop here. Thank you.
But Bern, is there any suggestion as well from the government and also for the government of Bangladesh, for the businesses in Bangladesh? I think for the business you mentioned it rightly about, you know, turn it into an opportunity, right? And also workers. Is there any suggestion, is there any advice for them to address this? especially for the government of Bangladesh?
I think EU has been working with the government of Bangladesh on the national labor law, and you know, there have been a lot of reforms initiated, and my message would just keep going, keep implementing what we have been working on. And if this is going to happen, I think we are seeing a much brighter picture when it comes to labor rights. But keep on implementing, keep on going, and think about the reputational gain you can have in the future.
Thank you, Bernd. Please, Rurai, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to follow up on Bernd's point about the fact that Bangladesh has put themselves at the forefront. They've got almost 200 green factories. And it's about, I think I've heard conversations around the need to promote this, and I have to see the role of the consumer in this process as well, because it's not just the brands, not just the manufacturers, not just the workers, but also it's about communication to consumers as well, and using the power of media to actually to tell a story about this, and use partners who are able to do that as well. I mean, international organizations like WaterAid, for example, but there are many others, have a direct means of communication with the general public in these markets. So I think use them as a way to actually communicate the success story of Bangladesh and the work that we're doing, and yeah, to use the power of media for that, for the benefits of that.
Thank you, Rurit. Andrew and Yasmin, do you have anything to add? Suggestion to Bangladesh?
I'll be quick. I know we're running out of time. Just one quick thought that came rather than repeating all of that was, and I love what you said about Bangladesh being a model for human rights due diligence, is actually look at the regulation that's coming up and bring together different stakeholders and use it as a vehicle to look at how you can improve things, and use it as a framework, as a way of actually going, this is coming, so if you bring the different stakeholders together, manufacturers, brands, NGOs, civil society together, and if the government can play a role in that as well, and actually look at the law and go, how do we make this work? Rather than see it as an imposition, see it as an opportunity, as a way of driving things forward. I think there's great opportunity in that. And I'm a great believer that if we do that and we look at finding the common ground where we can come together on that and do that, we can make it work. But avoid the adversarial approach that comes together and then goes pointing fingers. And so that's my one piece on it.
Thank you, Andrew. And I don't think we start from the scratch, right? We have some already start. Yasmin?
Yeah.
And then I'll give it to Mr. Fayaz.
Yeah, the clock is very intimidating. But just to jump on what Lena said, the thing with the Dundugal agreement, which is also based on similar agreements in Lesotho, is that they're worker-led. And I think that's, instead of a top-down approach, you're actually engaging the people it affects the most and asking them what needs to be done. And I think that makes for a far more effective scheme. So freedom of association, I believe, is so important. Listening to the workers, not treating them as units of productivity, but as partners, because that's what they really are.
Thank you. So, Mr. Fayaz, you have the last 7 minutes, and basically, I think so far we discussed a lot about the new human rights due diligence merging, but it's also not really new because it's been implemented as well. And then I think we see a lot of message to Bangladesh is to work at the policy level and also at the sector level. Please respond. Your response, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry that I'm so late. Actually, I kind of dug my own grave here. I looked at the program overview and was telling Mustafiz that I don't see anyone from Bangladesh in this panel on human rights due diligence. And then he kept insisting that I join this conversation. And so I couldn't say no to Mustafiz, and here I am, and very impressed to see this big gathering. I mean, throughout the day you have been listening to these conversations and you're still here. That means something. So that's very encouraging. I got the last part of the interventions extremely useful. We are kind of familiar with these issues. We are definitely working with our partners on a lot of these issues, so I will not go into repeating those. Just to make 5 quick points. I mean, first of all, human rights is something that we in Bangladesh, we own as our own. I mean, human rights is not something that is imposed on us by the Western world. I mean, please do not have any such notion. I mean, this is a country that was born because we wanted to secure our political and economic rights. So human rights remains a part of our DNA, and we should not feel in any way defensive or apologetic about our human rights standards and performance. That should be a message that should resonate with our social partners as well. That's the first point. Thank you for that encouragement. Second point, the government would like to work along with our social partners and other development partners to improve the situation of our workers, to score better in terms of due diligence. But what we would also expect from our international friends is a bit of trust in us. When we engage with our friends, we often see that there is this lack of trust in our ability to make changes. And that really hurts. At times, it reeks of sheer condescension, that as if we are not able to do the right thing. Just let me give two examples. Somebody mentioned the RMG Sustainability Council. After Accord was exhausted, the business sector came up with the idea of the RMG Sustainability Council. But there was so much mistrust about this whole mechanism. It was quite hurtful, to be very honest. And it was actually our judiciary, our apex court, that had said that Accord cannot continue to operate in this country. And we don't know, just because it's the judiciary of Bangladesh, that's why it has to be ignored or discarded. That really hurts our feeling. We do have an established judiciary system, and when we are telling our development partners that please do respect that, and still we hear that no, RMG would be, RSC would be subject to influence and misgovernance and so forth, that does not really help us in pushing things forward. As a government, we have to get that trust. So please bear with us on that. The second thing is about tripartite consultation. We are ready to work on all kinds of legal or policy reforms, but the government maintains that we have to take it through tripartite consultations. Now, often we engage with our international partners and they seem to suggest that why can't the government push through some of the reforms? We just can't, because there are strong voices from the employers and from the workers. And we are bound by ILO standards that we will have to operate through these social dialogue mechanisms, these tripartite mechanisms. So again, our request to our international friends, please make up your mind. At times you allege that we are being authoritarian, where we do not deserve such allegations. On the other hand, you are telling us that why do we have to pay attention to the tripartite mechanism and why cannot the government ramrod some of the reform initiatives? We cannot reconcile with these. So again, since many of our friends are here, this would be our request that please have some trust in our government. We have been delivering on many of our international commitments, and our political leadership has set very grand visions, and we remain committed to do that. So as part of that, the more we have your trust and understanding about these things, the better it would be to take forward our work. ILO is, of course, one of our close partners. But again, there is an unfortunate fact. The workers group in ILO, they have been taking us almost for a ride. We use the word forum shopping. They have filed this case and that case against Bangladesh. In most of the cases, they could not sustain it. So currently, they have used the last resort, the complaint under Article 26, which is very unfortunate. And I hope some of our worker colleagues are here. This is not to blame the workers' representation in ILO, but we are continuously being subjected to this. And we often say this, that if we want to talk to our employers, we know that there is Bangladesh Employers Federation. I'm sure there are many shades of views there, but at least they stand on the same platform. But when we try to speak to our worker colleagues, it's such a fractious landscape. We just cannot interact with them. Even, people, delegates, I mean, representatives of workers who enjoy confidence of capitals like Washington and Brussels, even they do not sit with each other, unfortunately. We tried to have a conversation with some of those people, but we were given a condition that you cannot invite one if the other is present. That is not a healthy situation. But who are we going to tell this to? I cannot say this in Geneva, so I'm using this platform to share this frustration. But please help us. I mean, I think our industry leaders are continuously saying that more than the number of trade unions, we need quality trade unions. And because of the legacy of trade unionism we have in this country, there are certain misgivings about that. So if you can actually help us with that, please, I mean, we would be most open to those suggestions. Last point, I just heard our US colleague use the word sanctions. Yes, that's probably the elephant in the room, but no, we are not scared. We are used to all these kind of things. But again, just to share a bit of frustration, that in 2016, the US government decided to withdraw, to restore the GSP facilities for Myanmar and withdrew all kind of sanctions against Myanmar. And 2017, the Myanmar regime committed what is now generally accepted as genocide. But since 2013, the US government has withdrawn GSP from Bangladesh. We do not even qualify for treatment that is given to a country that has committed textbook example of ethnic cleansing and genocide. So these are kind of things that do not really help get the conversation forward. We are just coming back from the LDC conference, UN LDC conference in Doha. There, the figures were being shown that Bangladesh has been able to utilize 75% of LDC-specific trade benefits. In case of EU, I think it's almost 98%. But why we are 75% globally? Because, again, our friends from the US did not agree to provide duty-free and quota-free access to all products from all LDCs as they have committed under the Doha Development Round. For some reason, which is inexplicable to us, they resorted to kind of a divide and rule policy within the LDC group and said that the Asian LDCs are too competitive, so we do not deserve duty-free, quota-free access. It would apparently hurt our African brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of situation we have to operate in. I just wanted to set that scene a little bit, not complaining about anything, but just to make sure that we are working together with ILO and we are working together with the European Union.
Yeah.
We will be continuing to do our job.
Thank you.
But please do not threaten us with sanctions and punitive actions.
Thank you.
That helps build trust.
Do you want to make a comment? Yeah, please. Just 1 minute because we the clock is off now. So please just briefly.
Thank you. Very briefly, I just wanted to address the point on the generalized system of preferences.
Please.
Just to clarify, the GSP program in the United States has actually lapsed as of January 1st of last year. So the points you make around Burma are very valid. We would not disagree with that whatsoever. And just to clarify that no countries under the current lapse are receiving GSP benefits. And the United States has been very clear and unequivocal about the situation in Burma, and we certainly stand by that. So I just wanted to clarify that they're not getting benefits.
Thank you, Lina. I think the time is off now. I would like to ask your applause to all of these panelists because it's been very interesting and how you enjoy it. And I think we don't want to have a formal photo, but you want to take a selfie together. Yeah, I think that's better. And then put it on the Twitter. I think that's better. Bert, do you mind to just use your phone and do it if you don't mind? Maybe from this or from there?
Thank you very much. And with that, we've come to the end of this plenary session. After the selfie is done, I would request the speakers and moderator to stand together for a group photograph.
Yeah, you'll see the photos on the Twitter, yeah? Thank you so much. Thank you, Fayaz. Yeah, thank you very Thank you.
Thank you very much once again, ladies and gentlemen. We will now have a short coffee and snacks break. Please enjoy your treats. It's my pleasure to remind you once again that the Green Growth Exhibition Zone is just outside the grand ballroom of the venue for you to visit. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going for a very short 10-minute coffee break.